Good morning, everyone. This is Lance Barron, the big peach here with a quill stuck through it. My camera's not working this morning. Welcome to Off the Shelf, the program of the Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter, where we try to engage crime readers with a crime writer and get books moving off the shelf and into the hands of readers. Dawn Gepfer is our host as usual, and we are glad to see our guest Lis Angus with us this morning. And Dawn, go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to have Lis with us today. She and I have been in a long motion of putting this together and getting her on the program. So we're super excited to have her. And it's timely because we're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the publication of her book. But she also got some great news yesterday that I'm going to have her share with us in just a minute. So let me introduce her to you. Lis Angus is a Canadian writer who holds graduate degrees in psychology and business from York University in Toronto. She has had a varied career as a policy advisor, business writer and editor, telecommunications consultant, conference organizer, and crisis counselor working with children and families. After retiring, she began yet another career, this time as a suspense writer. She's a member of Sisters in Crime, International Thriller Writers, Crime Writers of Canada, and Capital Crime Writers, and is an active participant in the North Grenville Writers Circle. Not Your Child is her debut novel, and she lives south of Ottawa with her husband. Welcome, Lis.
Thank you, Dawn. This is great. Now, somehow I've got it set up so I can't see myself, but I've got a little picture of me. I see see your face there. So yes, so here's my book. First of all, here's the picture. And my great news was that yesterday, and still this morning, it hit the #1 bestseller spot on Amazon Canada and Amazon Australia. So I was absolutely blown away. That was just fabulous news. Means there's lots of new readers. You know, for a new writer, the challenge is getting people's attention so they know that the book exists. And so suddenly this has happened. So that's just lovely.
Absolutely. And we're very excited. And we definitely want to learn all about your story and how it came about and the writing of it. But first, I always like to talk with our authors and ask them to give us their backstory. I want to know about Lis Angus, and I touched on a lot of stuff about you, but I want to know about Lis Angus off the back cover, or not part of her bio on the back cover of her book.
Well, I've done a lot of things in my life. You mentioned working with children in crisis. I did. That was actually early in my career. After I finished my first degree, I worked with children who were in treatment and also families and their families. And so certainly I draw on that for my writing. I then decided I needed to know more about it. I then went to graduate school and was intending to be a psychologist. So I actually did a master's and almost everything for a PhD in psychology, except by the time I'd gotten there, I decided really being a clinician was not really my best bent. It's not really where I was heading. And so I made a big switch at that point, moved into business. I did an MBA. The whole telecommunications policy and regulation field was something that I worked on. My husband and I had a consulting firm, and my end of it was I did a lot of policy advice to various government departments in Canada. Also, I worked with a number of the telecommunications providers, doing market research, all that kind of thing. I even did some work in Europe for the federal government. I provided some sessions at our embassies, telling European companies about NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, and encouraging them that coming to Canada would be a way to get into that. which was interesting. I remember, for example, being at the head office of the Finnish telecommunications company, whose name has escaped me right now, but it's one we all know about. And just seeing their production and hearing about that. And so I also we had a magazine, a telecommunications magazine that was widely subscribed to by managers of telecommunications at businesses. So these weren't providers, and they weren't your regular, residential user of phone service, but it was people who were managing their company's telecommunication services. So I wrote a lot of regulatory things. Every time a regulatory decision came down, I had to translate it into plain English. That was what I did. So I was writing business, I was editing, but I had always wanted to write fiction. And I had written fiction as a teenager. I had sent in stories to Red Book, the Saturday Night Post. And of course they got turned down, but I'd always wanted to pursue that. But it wasn't until I retired that, as you said, then I decided, okay, if I'm ever going to do this, now's the time. So that was the next step.
So writing fiction, creative writing, because you definitely had a long career in more business structured type writing. But so that was always something that was in the back of your mind, something that you wanted to return to.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I wrote my first novel at age 9. I spent the summer with my cousin, and she lived on a farm. I lived on a farm too, but we lived far enough away from each other that we had to stay with each other for a real visit. So I spent the summer with her. And because they had a lot of visitors, they filled the house, and she and I slept in the hayloft. So we holed up in this hayloft, and we each wrote a novel. So I don't remember anything about what was in the novel, and I'm sure it wasn't very long because it filled one of those school scribblers that we had, but we had great fun writing it.
So before we go any further, I want to suggest a couple of things to the audience. Number one, click up at the top and make sure that your view is gallery so that you can see all of us and not just the speaker, because I don't want to be that big on the screen. But if you'll click on gallery view, but also use the chat if you want to ask any questions. I also encourage you to unmute yourself and speak up. This is meant to be interactive for our audience so that I don't have to be the only one asking questions. We would love for you to ask questions as well. So one of the questions I was going to ask you is when you mentioned that you had submitted your writing when you were younger to the Ladies' Home Journal and the Saturday Evening Post. Do you remember what those stories were?
No, I have no idea. I remember typing them. I had a kind of a studio that I'd made for myself in our hayloft, in our barn. So I used to go up there, and I had visions in my mind. I subscribed to Writer's Digest at that point. I had visions in my mind of I was going to be a writer, and I was going to probably live in Mexico, where I could live, if you sold a story, it would sell for $1,000. That wouldn't be enough to live on for a year. I lived a long time ago. I was a kid a long time ago. So $1,000 would go a long way in those days.
That's great. I love that. I love hearing that. And I did the same thing. I submitted a story. I think it was to 17 magazine, and I never heard a word, but that's fine. Okay. So aside from a love of writing and it being something that has kind of carried you through as a desire throughout the adult life, tell us about the actual starting off point and the jumping off point that you're retiring, and now you're like, okay, now it's time. Let's write that story that's been banging around in my head for a while.
Well, one of the things that happened was NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And I'd heard of it, but hadn't paid any attention to it. And it was when I retired, I thought, you know, if I'm going to write, now would be the time. And that might actually give me the impetus to get started. So I thought, you know, I'd been writing. I always needed an outline to write anything. So I thought I'll write a novel. I'll write an outline for my novel. So I started with what I thought was an outline, and I did it. You know, I did the 50,000 words in a month, which is what NaNoWriMo requires. And then I sat down to actually turn it into something. What I learned right away was that I'd had a lot to learn. So I, luckily, because I was a member of Sisters in Crime and I was a member of the Gepfer group of Sisters in Crime, which runs a number of fabulous writing classes by excellent teachers, reasonable prices, and I took a whole lot of those. I also met a lot of writers online and exchanged, you know, we did critiques of each other, we exchanged manuscripts. It was a long process. I think I had 7 drafts before I finally got the book published, and every one of them was different. At one point, I threw out the entire final 25% and changed the ending completely, and which was a smart decision. And there we go.
So I'm impressed that you were dedicated enough during the month of November, you know, 1 year, and said, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to write 50,000 words. I can tell you that I say that probably every other year, and I might write something on day 1, and then somehow life gets in the way, and it just, I just don't dedicate myself to it. But it's a nice thought. And I'm sure there are some other authors here in the audience that have also done what you did and used that month to get them going, or to finesse what they've been working on and to really commit to it. So I'm impressed that you did it out of the gate, because I know that it's not an easy thing to do. But so you mentioned that you were already a member of a Sisters in Crime. What, even though you hadn't written anything, what prompted you to join?
Okay, it was after I finished the NaNoWriMo version that I decided to get serious. It was that point I joined Sisters in Crime. I hadn't joined anything ahead of time. I had done also some fiction writing classes with Gotham Writers Clinic in New York. These were online classes too. This was earlier. This was before I retired. And I thought, you know, when I'm retired, maybe I would like to do some writing. But so I'll need to know some more about fiction writing. And so I was looking for online classes, and those classes were also very good, although they didn't really teach anything about novel writing. It was that we wrote short stories, but there was a lot of critiquing of actual writing, which was also very good. You know, you need to know the small scale of writing, but you also need to know how to structure a whole novel. And it was that whole structure of a novel that I really had to learn. Pacing, character arc, plotting, all of those things that make for a good novel. And I had done a lot of reading. I was always a crime reader. And I thought, well, you know, surely because I've read so much, I know how to do this. But I found that, you know, making it happen is a lot different from just experiencing it as a reader.
Well, another thing I hear a lot is that authors have that first novel. They write a first novel, they assess it at the end of it, and they think, oh, this isn't worth pursuing. As you said, I still have a lot to learn, and they end up shelving it. It goes in a drawer. But you didn't do that.
I didn't know. I've heard of authors who have 4 novels in the drawer that they didn't go anywhere else. I just decided I wasn't going to waste the time I'd already put in, that I would work at it and work at it. I also knew from all my business writing that your first draft is never the final draft, that's just to get a start, and you need to fine tune it. So I took that same approach to fiction. And certainly I think that is true, that in fact, it's been said, all writing is rewriting, and I do believe that.
I like that quote. And yes, it is true. It's true. And probably all the writing that we do, as you mentioned, just an email, sometimes you have to go back over it several times before you feel like it's okay to send. And then you still find out you shouldn't have sent it.
But you know,
right?
I think some people think that their first effort is enough. I've heard of people who, once they finish NaNoWriMo, immediately want to then publish it on Amazon, which seems ridiculous.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Why? Because you're right, that does happen. And because we have platforms like Amazon, it's possible to make that happen. These days. We don't, you don't necessarily have to go to a publishing house to get your book out there. So why do you think that what did you recognize in your story that made you say, no, not yet? It's not there yet.
Well, first of all, it wasn't long enough. 50,000 words is not a publishable novel. And also, something in me wanted the validation of having someone else say, this is worth publishing. Well, I read the thing and I knew this is not yet worth publishing. If I were a reader, there wasn't enough there. And it didn't have depth, it didn't have complexity. It was, there were stretches that were boring. And the other thing is, if you're trying to churn out 1,700 words a day, which is what you have to do to get your 50,000 words done in a month, those are not good words. They're just words. You have not fine-tuned it at all. And, you may have a great idea later on that you haven't laid the groundwork for at all and earlier on because you hadn't thought of it yet. So really, I think it's important. It was important to me to end up with what I thought was a quality text, a book that I would enjoy reading. And I'm just so happy to discover that a lot of people have enjoyed reading it. That actually is my other bit of great news, is that all of the reviews I've been getting on Amazon and Goodreads, they're averaging really very good. They're 4.4 out of 5 roughly, which I'm thrilled with, because I see lots of best-selling authors whose average is not as high as that. Now, mind you, they get a lot more readers than I do. And maybe only the ones who like my books have commented. That's not to say there aren't some who have rated it lower, but on average, they're very happy with it. And that makes me so happy as a writer, because you want to connect with your readers. That's the whole point.
True, and that's why we do this program. Hi, Linda. Would you like to ask a question?
Hi, good morning. I have a question, and congratulations on your book. It does sound interesting.
Good.
It's a lot of stories about children. They're delicate, and it seems like I've looked at a few of your reviews while you've been talking, and it seems like you handled it wisely and carefully and respectfully. So that's good. I am familiar with Wild Rose Press, and I'm curious how you ended up with them for the first thing. And also, did you do your own promotion, because you did manage to get reviews? Did you get those through Sisters in Crime or through, and I'm talking about, not just Amazon reviews, but other people. So I'm just curious, did they promote your book a lot, or did you have to do the promotion yourself?
Okay, well, maybe we have to step back a little bit and just talk about my route to publication. So I did the usual querying to hope to get agents, because certainly to be published by a large publisher, any of the big fives, you have to have an agent. And so I had taken that lesson to heart and queried. I went through 3 different stages of querying. Each time there were some who said, well, send me your whole manuscript and I'll read it. But then, one by one, they'd say, that's not quite for us. And each time, so after say 20, I think, well, maybe I thought this book was ready to query, but I guess maybe it wasn't. So then I did another revision, and then I'd try again. And I did that. So then I did another revision because I went through the same process again. And at the third time around, I thought, okay, I'm going to query this again. And if I don't get any bounce this time, I'm going to self-publish. Which, you know, is perfectly respectable. There's lots of people who self-publish and do very well with their books. But as I said, I really was hoping to have the validation of somebody else saying, yes, this is worth publishing. So, but before I, you know, in that time, I was still querying agents, but I also thought there are some smaller publishers who will accept unagented submissions. So I sent it off to several of those. And there were several of them actually who gave me some good advice. I ended up with two who were quite interested in the book. And one was an editor at Wild Rose. The other one was one in the UK. But the one in the UK still wanted another draft before she would take it to her committee. And the Wild Rose editor said, I want to take it to my committee now. So at that point, I thought, fine, we'll see. And then they made me an offer. Now, Wild Rose is a good publisher. Before I agreed to their contract, I checked with some of the other writers that I knew, particularly on the Sisters in Crime Guppy group, and got good, you know, several people who had published with them and felt they'd been treated fairly and well. But they're a small publisher, and they, like most small publishers, they, number one, they focus on ebooks, and the paperbacks are print on demand, which is fine also. And they do not do a lot of marketing. They'll give you assistance, help, you know, but they don't do actually any marketing. So as far as marketing, I have had to learn it all myself. And that is, as I think any new author will tell you, marketing is as much work as writing the book in the first place. I've been very lucky to team up with a group of other debut authors in my year, mostly at Wild Rose, but also with a number of debut authors in crime. The ones at Wild Rose aren't all crime that I teamed with. We got together because we were new, but they weren't all crime writers. Then there's a group of debut crime writers also for our year, and there have also been several of those that have given me good advice. But so just sharing advice on how to go about, how to claim your Amazon author page, how to get reviews. All of those things are things that, you know, we've all been pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. There's advice to be had from other authors who've gone through it before. And I'm really impressed with how generous authors are with advice to some of us who are just beginning the journey. So that's what I can tell you about that. I'll also say that I'm quite shameless in asking for reviews. So I have a newsletter, it goes out. I always say, if you've liked my book, please review it on Amazon and Goodreads. And so, you know, a lot of people have responded to that. I've also been lucky to get a few good editorial reviews, and that's important also. I've discovered that libraries, if they want to stock your book, often want to check that there have been third-party reviews by professional reviewers, because they want to make sure that the book that they're buying using their library budgets are ones that readers will want to read.
So before I definitely want to circle back and talk about the promotion and the business side of your book, but let's talk about your book first. Let's get that out there. So I'm gonna just read a blurb on it very quickly, and then we'll start chatting. So the title of the book is Not Your Child, and It says, when Ottawa psychologist and single mother Susan Koss discovers that a strange man has been following her 12-year-old daughter, Maddie, she fears he's a predator. But it's worse than that. The man believes Maddie is his granddaughter, abducted as a baby, and he's obsessed with getting her back. So very intense. And as Linda mentioned, a delicate subject. And one of the questions that I had is, was there any hesitation or any feedback from the experts as you were trying to sell your book, querying your book? Was there any feedback that, oh, maybe you shouldn't try to jump into the child, you know, a child crime or a crime related to children out of the gate?
I have to say, nobody ever said that. No. In fact, when I said that I threw out the original ending, the reason I did that was that one of my very trusted critique partners said, you know, she doesn't actually ever face a real danger. You have to have her facing some real danger. And so she does. This is the girl. So the story's told actually from those three people's points of view. So you get Susan, who's the 40-ish mother, single mother. You have Maddie, who's 12 and just itching to, she just yearns to be more independent. Her mother's always telling her what to do and she doesn't want to be told what to do. And then there's Daniel, who's recently lost his wife, a longtime wife, and they both were devastated when their daughter and son-in-law were killed in a car accident and the baby disappeared from the back seat, and they always wanted to find this baby. And of course, that was 12 years ago. So she, and he's a visitor to Ottawa, and he then sees Maddie walking down on the way to school. And he's struck by the fact that she looks just like his daughter did when she was that age. And he says, who could look like that? Who could look identical to that, except it must be her daughter. And he's convinced. And, so several people have said, reading this, I could sympathize with all three of them, including Daniel. Except, of course, Daniel goes downhill in the story.
Oh. So don't tell us too much, because the goal here is to intrigue us so that we go buy the book and we get it off the shelf and into the hands of readers. But I think it sounds really fascinating. And I'm very curious how the idea of this even came to you.
Well, it's hard to know how it popped into my mind. The image I had in my mind was, what if someone showed up and said that your child wasn't your child? And so then I had to think, well, how could that happen? What would be the backstory to any of that happening? What kind of people could be involved? And then how would the events unfold from there? How would they react? How would the mother react? How would the child react? And who would be the person who was making this accusation? How could that happen?
Mm-hmm.
So that was the exploration. And every draft had me delving deeper into these people.
You've introduced us to your three main characters. And I'm curious, as I'm sure everyone else is as well, with your background in psychology, how has that helped you with the development and the character arcs?
Well, it has, I think, because I certainly had experience with how much an entire family pattern affects a child, and vice versa. That a child isn't a single thing. A child is part of a family. I worked in family dynamics and family therapy, but I also say that a great part of this came from my own experience in raising my own daughters. And I actually went through an experience with each of them that I think many people have had happen. Luckily, in my case, it was short-lived. But each of them, as young children, I lost them in a shopping mall. I turned around and they were gone. And just the terror of, number one, where are they? What if I can't get them back? Number two, the guilt. Why was I not paying attention? How could I have been distracted and let them disappear? And so I certainly drew on those emotions to try and recreate how Susan is feeling when her daughter disappeared.
So it's possible that the premise of this story has actually been deep inside and has been kind of bubbling below the surface for a while. You took definitely a very frightening thing that I believe all parents can relate to, and you rewrote it and you channeled it so that it came from a different direction, and it wasn't a lost child that started it all, but somebody coming to knock on a door and saying, I'm not sure that this child you say is yours is actually yours. And I want to challenge you on that. And that's a frightening thought, especially when you're convinced, like, no, this is my kid. I know this is my kid.
Of course.
I birthed this child, didn't I? Right. So,
Yeah.
And, it also somewhat segues, and I don't know how deep the story goes into this, but the possible legal ramifications of such an accusation, and potentially being coerced into proving and providing the proof that this child is definitely your biological child or your legal child, if that were the situation.
Well, that's the other complication, is that demands I see you have a friend there. Yes. Susan demands a DNA test, which she assumes will prove her case, but it doesn't. It then, because the news to her is, it does not seem that this is your child, which she doesn't understand at all. How can that be true? I know she's my child. So that's the other complication here. And that also then confuses everyone. So
was that because you mentioned that there were multiple rewrites? You said I think there were 7 revisions. So was that part of the story, that climatic, FYI, here's the reality of your situation? Was that always part of the story, or did you introduce that at some point as part of a revision or a recommendation from someone?
I don't think it was in draft 1, but it came in quite early. And it was when I did some research on whether that could even happen, and discovered some interesting stories that I then brought into the book. That had that happen. But I also had some interesting insights into Susan's backstory and her own childhood that also affected her reaction to all of this, and to her approach to child raising.
Well, you had mentioned that the story and creating the story required you to delve into their backstories and go into their lives and their history and what makes them who they are today. So it sounds.
Yes. Now, I will say I was very minimal in the amount of backstory I wrote. It's not a lot of flashbacks. They're just little bits, just enough that you can understand the picture. But I find that's actually often distracting in a book, to have a lot of long backstory. And, it's the main story here is what's happening right now.
And so you creatively wove the backstory to give us tidbits so that there is a sense of understanding. And as you already mentioned, some compassion towards all of the characters.
Yes, and it's more, how is the backstory affecting them now, not just what happened then.
So I'm gonna say it again. I'm imagining that your background and experience in studying psychology and practicing it as well probably played a really big part in you being able to develop this story to the extent that you did.
That could be, and also think to my own backstory, the reason I was interested in following that part of my life was also the same kind of interest that's bringing me to this writing now. The interest in people and how they react to things. And so studying psychology and writing fiction, those are in a way, two different ways of pursuing that interest.
And yet you're also throwing in the crime, the suspense,
Yes, of course.
the thriller element of it
Right.
as well. It's not just a family drama.
No,
Right.
yes. So the girl disappears. She can't be found. The police are searching for her. There are posters all over town. Where is she?
And there's a suspect too. The guy that's been knocking on the door.
Yes, except he has an alibi, a well-established alibi, and they've searched his house twice. There's no sign of her.
Definitely fascinating, very interesting. And I can assure you that my to be read pile has just increased for sure. I cannot wait to get my hands on the book. And so let's talk about the fact, we've already mentioned this, that your book is, it's been out for a year. We're celebrating the anniversary of its publication. And Linda had asked about the business side of it. So you went through numerous revisions, you finally get it published, and now what? Now what have you been doing this past year?
Okay,
Not
well,
detail, but
so I learned in I guess January a year ago that my release date was going to be April. So the first thing I did was to set up a launch committee. And these were people who were not, they weren't influencers, they were just people I knew who were willing to help me get the news out. Because as I said, the big challenge for any new writer is getting anybody's attention. There are so many new books coming out all the time. How are you going to get the attention of anybody? So every week leading up to the launch date, my street team I'd send them little tidbits, and they would send it out to the people they knew. And as far, because my own list was small, I figured at least if they publish it to people that they know, it'll get a little wider. So that helped promote pre-sales. So there were quite a few people who'd already pre-ordered it before it came out. Then on the actual launch day, think back, we were still in the pandemic period. And it had seemed that things were slowing down and I could have a book launch at our public library. But then came another wave of COVID, and we decided an indoor meeting is not going to be smart. But luckily we had a lovely sunny day, and I had an outdoor launch that the mayor of my small town came to, and she brought the entire council, and we had a lovely posed picture with the river in the background in the local park in our town, with a big image of the book. And then the book, of course, was launched, and all the people who had pre-sold were getting their copies. And so, of course, then I would send out my note saying, can you please write a review, etc. And there were a few third-party professional reviewers who were willing to review it as well. I also got, in our local paper, I got a article. There were two local papers that wrote an article about it. I also sent a press release to two of the papers where I had grown up in Alberta and gone to high school. And so each of them also, local girl makes good stories. And again, then once one of those came out, then I would publicize that again a little bit and send it out to as many people as I could. So, you know, trying to do that, but at that point, I didn't have the nerve to do any actual promotion, like in terms of buying advertising. Although I know a lot of indie writers, they do a lot of advertising using Amazon ads and Facebook ads and so on. All of mine was just kind of on social media and word of mouth, you know, between people. And then this, just now with the anniversary, I thought, you know, really, I want to mark this in some way. And so I applied to BookBub for one of their featured deals. And so they actually gave me a date on Friday for the international market. So that's Canada, Australia, and the UK, not the US. They didn't give me a date for the US. So that's too bad for me because the US is the biggest market. I would have loved that. But I will say that the other three markets, it's just been a stunner. I went from, in Australia, I was completely unknown. And then I think this morning I'm still #1 bestseller on Kindle suspense novels. And the same in Canada. Now, because I didn't have a BookBub deal for the US, I did do some other things. There were some smaller promo sites that do put it out. And so although I certainly didn't hit bestseller level, I did increase my sales in the US. I have no idea what these ratings actually turn into numbers of sales. And there's always a delay between the sale and it being actually reported to anything that I get to see. So it'll probably be a few weeks before I know what actually happened. Mm-hmm. But just to see the ranking rise, it's very exciting. It was, you know, my husband was listening to me screaming from my office as the numbers came in.
So what I'm hearing is you did a lot of self-promotion. You had the foresight to say, I'm going to do my own publicity. I'm going to take the steps to get this communication out there and let people know that I have done this. And I'm thinking that your background in business probably helped you understand what to do and how to go about doing it. Would you agree or disagree with that?
It certainly gave me some understanding of it, but I think the actual mechanics are ones that I just took from advice from other writers who had gone through this earlier or were going through it at the same time. You know, some of these promo sites, just somebody would say, well, I've tried this and it worked really well, or I tried such and such and it didn't work very well. So, you know, that kind of nitty-gritty experience shared among writers is so valuable. And yes, so part of it is the theory, part of it is the on the road what happens.
The boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of our audience members has asked a question, Lynn Hess. She wants to know, how did you develop your antagonist? And did you do a characterization sketch?
Oh, yes. I had to do a lot of thinking about Daniel. And actually, Daniel was one of my favorite characters, even though he was my antagonist and the bad guy in the story. I could really, so I worked through his story. I could feel his emotion, the variety of emotions, his emotion when he was having troubles with his daughter, and then his fears and his guilt at having, you know, some of the things that he had done, and also how hard things are for him. You know, so even though I couldn't condone his actions later on, I certainly could I could understand how it could have arrived at that, and I hope I conveyed it on the page. I got the feeling from a number of people who made the comment that yes, they could empathize with him, even though they didn't, they didn't want to be him, but they could see how he had become who he was.
So this is very exciting. You have a bestseller and you're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of your publication. So now are you working on anything new? Is there another book on the horizon for you?
Oh, yes, I am. I'm partway through my second book. I'm a slow writer. It takes me a long time. I have a first draft that I did. I'm working my way through the second draft. I'm about halfway through it, and I've sort of interrupted it this month because I've been working on promotion for the anniversary. But yes, so I'm definitely working on a second one. It's a standalone, so this is not turning into a series. It also takes place in Ottawa, and it also has it started with just a single image, and that image is that my protagonist discovers that her deceased father had another family, and the other family has now discovered her family, and her family, her mother, was the second family, the secret one.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm excited to read that too. I know you said you're a slow writer, but like, what has the process sped up for you because now you've already been through it once, or do you think it'll still take?
I can't say it's sped up. It's a different stage. I think I'm not making some of the mistakes I did early on, but I also, because I've now learned so much about things that I should do, that I'm trying to do all of those. So it's probably a different stage, but I think for a lot of people, the second book is a big challenge, partly because you want to get it out more quickly than the years you spent on your first book, but also because you have learned more, you've raised your standards of what you expect of yourself.
Do you have a working title for the new book?
I don't.
No, okay.
Some people start with the title.
Uh-huh.
I don't. The titles come to me late. Yeah.
And well, speaking of titles, I love the title of your first book. Was that your title, or was that a recommendation at publication to change it?
No, that was my title. I started off with a different title and changed it, which I've forgotten now what it was. Changed it partway through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
and there are many ways in which that title resonates through the story. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, right away. Right away, the title captured me, in all honesty. And then I looked into it a little bit further, and I was like, oh yeah, we want to know more about this and about the woman who wrote it. So thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. Before we go, I always like to ask if there's any book that you have read recently, or one that it doesn't have to have been recent, but one that is a favorite of yours that you would recommend to our audience to pick up and enjoy.
Well, one that I recently read was Hank Philippi Ryan's The House Guest, which was just launched in February, and she's done fabulously with it. Now, she doesn't need my recommendation by any means, but this is a fabulous book. I think it went into second printing after 6 days, which shows you how popular it is. But it is one that I think a lot of people would enjoy.
And I just remembered, I have seen you quite often on the Saturday evening program that she does with Karen Dion.
Oh yeah,
the back room.
Isn't that lovely?
I caught you in the audience, but we don't end up in the same room, so our opportunity to engage with one another is restricted to those first few minutes.
Yeah.
But that program, and I don't mind sharing it with everybody, It's an excellent program. It's called The Back Room, and it's Hank Philippi Ryan and Karen Dion are the hostesses. And it's much like this format, only there's 4 authors, and it's an hour and a half, I believe, to 2 hours long, but you sit there on the Zoom call, and the author changes and comes and joins you in your room, and you get 15 minutes with the author, and it's great. And we didn't model this after that. We found out about it afterwards, and we watched it. We were like, oh, that's what Off the Shelf is supposed to be like. We're the baby to that. So does anybody have a question before we sign off? If you want to ask, please unmute and let's go for it. Otherwise, pop it into the chat and I'll ask it for you. Okay, Charlie, go ahead.
Well, I put it in the chat.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
Tell us about your local critique group, or is it local? And number 2, are you in a Sisters in Crime local chapter?
We don't have a Sisters in Crime local chapter in Ottawa where I live. We do have another group called Capital Crime Writers. Ottawa is obviously the capital of Canada, and it's very, very similar to Sisters in Crime, and we provide a lot of support to each other. My local writing group is the North Grenville Writer Circle, and it's much more diverse. It was founded just about 3 or 4 years ago, and it attracts all kinds of, it started with new writers, all of us who were just wanting to be writers, becoming writers, and there's a constant flow of new writers coming through it. So it's a combination of both encouraging each other as we're writing, but also there's a large Facebook group associated with it. So actually there's a lot of communication on the Facebook group with people who never show up to the actual meetings, but there's a lot of support to each other that way. And I have to say that the kind of mutual support that other writers provide is invaluable. I've ended up with a group of about, I think I have 3 trusted writers that I share my drafts with now, who give me feedback. We've exchanged, we're about at the same stage. We've exchanged manuscripts for each other. We both know what we want from each other, and that helps very much. But I've gotten advice from so many other writers, and at different stages for different parts of my writing. It's absolutely invaluable.
Is that available to anybody? Can any of us join since is online?
The Ottawa Crime Writers, yeah.
No, well, the North Grenville.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah. You can search it on Facebook, and it's a Facebook group.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, Liz, thank you so much for joining us today. Very interesting. I'm very much looking forward to reading Not Your Child, as well as your new book when it comes out. And I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is a good group, and I'm excited to see that we've drawn some attention, and we've got a nice size audience. So thank you so much. Mary has a question.
Well, actually, I have a comment. First of all, I love these sessions. And Liz, I'm going to go out and buy your book as soon as we're done. I mean, I'm totally fascinated. And it was so helpful to hear your process with really concrete things that you did. And Dawn, thanks again. You give a great interview. So thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Dawn,
Mary.
Dawn, I want to thank you for inviting me. And this has just been a lovely chat, and what a great program you have. So congratulations on that. And I'm really honored to be here visiting with you and your crew.
Well, thank you. We're honored to have you. And we are recording this program, and we will have it on our YouTube channel. We will also have it posted on our website. So have a look for that. And Liz, I'll make sure I send you those links so that you have direct access to them.
That's great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Just a reminder, we have our chapter meeting coming up on the second Saturday, and the speaker will be Edward Andy Anderson, who's a psychologist, and will be talking about giving us insights into writing mental health characters, not necessarily the patients, but the providers. And that will be at 10:30 on the second Saturday in May. And of course, before that, coming up will be Dawn and Reader Rendezvous. That'll be the first Saturday in May at 10 o'clock. And am I leaving anything out, Dawn?
No, but is the first Saturday in May the 6th? I
Yes.
think it is.
Yes, it is.
Hopefully, I'm attending my son's college graduation. So someone is going to have to lead Reader Rendezvous for me that week. I hope nobody minds me passing the
Well,
buck. I'm looking at you,
I
Mary.
hope his grades allow him to graduate.
Yes. Well, I did say hopefully. Hopefully he's going to
Yeah,
graduate.
yeah.
All right.
Well, congratulations to Cal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, everyone, thank you again. Appreciate it. Charlie, go ahead and let's stop the recording, and hopefully we'll see you guys at our chapter meeting. And hopefully